In this video, we'll be exploring the effects of latency on real-time multiplayer in mobile games. To fully comprehend the effects of latency, we must first understand the feedback loop between players. Let's look at the interaction of first-person shooters as an example. Each player has the ability to aim and to evade and pursue. Player 1's aiming depends on Player 2's evasion, and Player 2's evasion depends on Player 1's aiming. The same is true for Player 1's evasion and Player 2's aiming. Furthermore, the aim of Player 1 is affected by his own evasion or pursuit, and the same is true of Player 2. When latency is thrown into the mix, the feedback cycle is corrupted to the point of divergence. Let's look at this in Nova 3 with 300 milliseconds of latency added. In this example, we see that positions become drastically inconsistent. Here you can see that both players are actually shooting each other in the back. When positions are inconsistent, the feedback loop breaks down. What might look like evasion on your screen might not be evasive at all on the other player's screen. These effects can be apparent without synthetic latency added, due to the game's implementation latency. Notice the inconsistency between aim and position across the screens. Both players have their sights trained on the other, but neither can tell. These problems extend beyond just first-person shooters. Let's look at Star Battalion, a spaceship game. Here, positions are completely out of sync. The player on the left is flying directly on top of the player on the right. The player on the right cannot see the player on the left in his screen. Position is also a huge issue for racing games, like Asphalt 8. Position errors are even more common in racing games because of the high speeds of the vehicles. Smaller latencies can still cause large position inconsistencies when you're traveling at high speeds. Here, the player on the left sees a collision, but the player on the right sees nothing. The most exciting parts of the game, like battling an opponent to run each other off the road, can be lost due to latency artifacts. Similar problems are obvious in Real Racing 2 without added latency. Even in local gameplay with both iPads linked to the same wireless network, you can see a large disparity in the positions of the two cars relative to each other. We also see a breakdown in the car's collision model, with cars often overlapping or going through each other. A combination of collisions and player action causes the game states to diverge, and the positions to become inaccurate. Once again here we see a large difference between the positions of the cars. Here, both players are in second place. It appears as though the iPad on the left and the iPad on the right are in completely different races. All of these glitches were shot in just one race of local play. When players are experiencing two completely different game states, how can there be a real winner? Real Racing 3 recently integrated real-time multiplayer into the game. Real Racing 3 sees the same problems as Real Racing 2 with no added latency. We still see inconsistencies, and sometimes both players can still be in first place. In fact, here we actually both finish the race in first place. Here's a look in slow-mo. Performance under latency remains problematic, as shown here. The two game states are completely inconsistent, with a collision on the right screen and nothing on the left screen. And again, both players are in first place. In most mobile games, on top of position inaccuracies, we see time warps and position warps. Notice how the player on the right screen freezes at a critical moment and causes him to die. The use of a logical clock means that the game time is inherently warped, which can lead to unrealistic character movement. Here you can see this effect, as the player is teleported off screen. On the right player's screen is another good example of position and time warping. In summary, we've seen that latency causes players to experience two completely different virtual realities. These inconsistencies vastly degrade the interaction between players and leave them with a sense of unfairness.